The massive library of Nexus Prime Academy stretched for miles in every direction. Its crystal walls held the knowledge of 1,000 worlds, and its databanks contained the military history of every species in the Galactic Alliance. For most cadets, it was a place of study and learning. For Cadet Kira, it was a treasure hunt waiting to happen. Kira stood before the main terminal, her crystalline fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Her Villani heritage made her naturally curious about patterns and hidden connections. The light from her translucent skin cast a soft blue glow on the screen as she searched through tactical warfare databases. "Are you still working on that assignment?" Rex asked as he approached her station. The Bruthan cadet towered over most other students, his 4 muscular arms making him look like he was built for war. His thick gray skin bore the traditional scars of his warrior culture, but his eyes held the intelligence that had earned him a place at the academy. "Professor Dane wants us to analyze 3 different battle strategies from history," Kira replied without looking up from her screen. "But all the good battles are restricted access. I keep hitting classified walls." Rex grunted in understanding. The academy was famous for its open access to information, but even here, some knowledge was kept locked away. "What about the border wars of Sector 7? Those files should be open." "Already checked." Same with the crystalline conflicts and the great trade route disputes. Kira's frustration was clear in her voice. "Every interesting battle I find has sections marked as classified or restricted to senior officers only." A soft mental touch brushed against both their minds, and they turned to see Cadet Nix approaching. The Mandari was small compared to his companions, barely reaching Rex's waist, but his large purple eyes held an ancient wisdom that made others forget his size. His telepathic abilities were carefully controlled, never invasive, but always present like a gentle warmth in the background. "I sense your frustration from across the library," Nick said, his voice carrying the musical quality common to his species. "Perhaps I can help. My mental abilities sometimes reveal connections that others miss." Kira gestured to the screen with obvious annoyance. "Every battle worth studying is locked away. How are we supposed to learn military tactics if we cannot access real examples?" Nix approached the terminal and placed his small 3-fingered hand on the interface. His eyes closed in concentration, and the other 2 cadets watched as the screen began to flicker and change. Data streams that had been hidden suddenly became visible, showing connection pathways between different files. "Interesting," Nix murmured, his telepathic senses picking up data patterns that normal searches missed. There is a common thread linking many of these restricted files. They all reference something called the Terra Incident. Rex leaned closer to the screen. "Terra? I have never heard of that world. Is it in the Outer Rim territories?" "No," Kira said slowly, her pattern recognition abilities kicking in as she studied the data streams Nix had revealed. "Look at the classification codes. These are not standard military restrictions. This is something else entirely." The 3 cadets stared at the screen as more information became visible through Nix's mental probing. File after file showed the same pattern. Detailed military analyses that suddenly cut off at the mention of Terra or humans. Battle reports that ended abruptly with notes about human involvement and immediate classification upgrade. "Humans." Rex said the word like he was tasting something strange. "I have heard of them. They are the species from the small blue world on the edge of Alliance space. But they are just traders and explorers, are they not?" Kira pulled up what little public information existed about humans. The files showed a species that seemed unremarkable compared to the mighty warriors of the galaxy. They had no natural armor like the Bruthan, no telepathic abilities like the Mindari, and no energy manipulation powers like her own Villani people. They were described as curious, social, and surprisingly adaptable. But nothing in the basic files suggested they would be connected to classified military incidents. "This does not make sense," Kira muttered, her crystalline form pulsing with confused light patterns. According to these public records, humans have never participated in any galactic conflicts. They joined the Alliance as a peaceful trading species only 50 years ago. Nix's mental probing grew deeper, his telepathic abilities reaching into data streams that were not meant to be accessed by students. There is more here, much more. But it is buried beneath layers of classification I have never seen before. Rex crossed his forearms and studied the screen with growing interest. If humans are just peaceful traders, why would their involvement in anything require such heavy classification? What could they have done that would make the Alliance hide it so completely? Look at this, Kira said, pointing to a series of dates that appeared in multiple files. The Terra incident happened 200 years ago, but humans only joined the Alliance 50 years ago. That means whatever happened occurred long before they were officially part of our civilization. Nix opened his eyes, his mental probe reaching its limits. I can sense there is much more information, but it is protected by security measures I cannot penetrate. However, I did find something interesting. Every file that mentions humans or the Terra incident contains a reference to something called the Galactic War Council Emergency Resolution 2847. Emergency Resolution? Rex repeated. Those are only issued during the most serious threats to galactic peace. Kira's fingers flew across the interface, searching for any reference to Resolution 2847. After several minutes of searching, she found only a single line of text. By unanimous vote of all member species, humans are hereby banned from participation in any galactic military conflict, effective immediately and in perpetuity. The three cadets stared at the screen in stunned silence. A complete ban on an entire species participating in warfare was unheard of in galactic history. Even the most aggressive warrior races were allowed to fight, with their actions regulated by treaty and convention. But humans, who seemed harmless by comparison, were completely forbidden from any military involvement. Banned, Rex said slowly, his warrior instincts trying to understand what could make the Alliance fear a species enough to ban them entirely. Not regulated, not restricted, but completely banned. And it was unanimous, Nix added, his telepathic senses still reeling from the emotional echoes he had detected in the classified files. Every species in the Alliance voted for this ban. That has never happened before, not even for the most dangerous predator races. Kira saved all the information they had found to her personal datapad, her mind racing with questions. We need to find out what happened during this Terra incident. Something made the entire galaxy so afraid of human military involvement that they banned them completely. But how? Rex asked. If this information is classified at the highest levels, how do we learn more? Nix closed his eyes again, reaching out with his telepathic abilities to sense the emotional residue left by others who had accessed these files. There is someone, he said quietly, someone who was there, who remembers. The emotional echoes are old but strong. Great fear, but also respect. Who? Kira asked. I am not certain, but the memories are connected to the veteran quarters. Someone who served during that time still lives here at the Academy. The veteran quarters of Nexus Prime Academy were located in the oldest section of the station. Here, retired officers and former warriors lived out their final years, sharing wisdom with young cadets when they felt like it. The corridors were dimmer than the rest of the Academy, and the walls bore the marks of age and countless stories. Kira, Rex, and Nix walked slowly through these halls, following the telepathic traces that Nix had detected in the library. The emotional echoes were stronger here, memories of fear and confusion that seemed to seep from the very walls. Are you certain about this? Rex asked, his forearms tensed with nervousness. The Bruthan warrior was used to facing physical challenges, but the idea of disturbing an old veteran made him uncomfortable. The memories are clear, Nix replied. his purple eyes focused on something the others could not see. Someone here carries deep knowledge about the Terra incident. The emotional scars are old, but still fresh. They stopped before a door marked with ancient Valkyrie symbols. The nameplate read, Commander Tor Valkyrie Defense Force, retired. Kira recognized the species name. The Valkyrie were one of the oldest. Members of the Galactic Alliance, known for their incredible memory and long lifespans. A Valkyrie, Kira whispered. They can live for over 800 years. If anyone was alive during the Terra incident, it would be one of them. Rex raised one of his massive hands to knock, but hesitated. What if he does not want to speak with us? Veterans do not always welcome curious students. Only one way to find out, Kira said, and pressed the door chime. The door opened slowly, revealing a figure that made all three cadets step back in surprise. Commander Tor was ancient even by Valkyrie standards. His once proud form was bent with age, and his scales had faded from their original silver to a dull gray. But his eyes still burned with the intensity of someone who had seen too much. Students, Tor said, his voice like grinding metal. What brings you to disturb an old soldier's peace? Nick stepped forward, his telepathic abilities immediately picking up waves of pain and buried trauma from the old Valkyrie. Commander, we are researching military history for our tactical studies. We found references to something called the Terra incident, but all the files are classified. Tor's reaction was immediate and violent. His aged body tensed, his scales bristled, and his eyes widened with what could only be described as terror. Terra, he whispered, and the word seemed to cause him physical pain. You should not speak that name here. Please, Commander, Kira said gently, her crystalline form dimming to show respect. We are just trying to understand. Why are humans banned from galactic warfare? What happened 200 years ago? The old Valkyrie stared at them for a long moment, his ancient mind clearly wrestling with old memories. Finally, he stepped aside and gestured for them to enter his quarters. The room was sparse but filled with military memorabilia from dozens of conflicts. Battle flags, weapon displays, and holographic recordings of famous victories covered the walls. But Kira noticed that none of the displays seemed to be from the time period they were interested in. Sit, Tor commanded, lowering himself carefully into a chair that had clearly been designed for his aging body. If you must know about Terra, then you should understand what you are asking. The three cadets sat in silence, waiting for the old warrior to gather his thoughts. Nix could sense the emotional turmoil in Tor's mind, memories that had been locked away for centuries struggling to surface. I was young then, Tor began, his voice distant with memory. Barely older than you are now. The Galactic Alliance was smaller, maybe 50-member worlds. We thought we knew everything about warfare, about honor, about the proper way to conduct military operations. Rex leaned forward, his warrior instincts engaged. What happened, Commander? There was a conflict, Tor continued, his scales rippling with remembered emotion. Two systems on the Outer Rim were fighting over mining rights. The Khazari Republic and the Thalan Empire. It should have been a simple matter, a few ships, some negotiations, maybe a small battle or two to settle the dispute. But it was not simple? Kira asked. Tor's laugh was bitter and filled with pain. Nothing was simple once the humans arrived. The Alliance had just made contact with them. They seemed so ... ordinary. Small, weak, no natural weapons or armor. We thought they could learn from observing a proper military conflict. Nick sensed a shift in Tor's emotions, fear mixing with something that might have been respect. They were supposed to be observers only? Observers, Tor repeated. That was the plan. A few human ships would follow our fleet and watch how civilized species conducted warfare. They were excited, eager to learn. Their military leaders asked so many questions about our tactics, our rules of engagement, our concepts of honor in battle. The old Valkyrie stood slowly and walked to one of his weapon displays, his clawed hand touching the ceremonial blade. The first battle went as expected. Clean, efficient, minimal casualties. Both sides followed the established rules of warfare. Ship-to-ship combat at respectable distances, surrender protocols honored, civilians protected. And the humans? Rex asked. They watched. They asked questions. They took notes on everything. Tor's voice grew darker, but then something changed. The Khazari began using new tactics. Strange, brutal methods that no civilized species would consider. Hit-and-run attacks on supply lines. Psychological warfare against civilian populations. Combat methods that violated every established rule of galactic warfare. Kira's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. The Khazari learned these tactics from watching the humans? No, Tor said, turning back to face them with eyes full of ancient fear. The humans taught them. When the Khazari asked for military advisors, the humans volunteered. They said they wanted to help end the conflict quickly. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Nix could feel the weight of Tor's memories pressing against his telepathic senses, emotions so strong. They threatened to overwhelm him. They did end it quickly, Tor continued, his voice barely above a whisper. 6 months. A conflict that should have lasted years, maybe decades, was over in 6 months. But not in any way we could have imagined. What did they do? Rex asked, though his voice suggested he was not sure he wanted to know. Tor returned to his chair, moving like someone carrying an invisible weight. They turned everything into a weapon. Supply ships became bombs. Civilian communications became spy networks. They taught the Khazari to fight in ways that made their enemies afraid to leave their own ships. But that ended the war, Kira said. Surely that was good? Both sides surrendered, Tor said, his voice hollow. Not to each other. To us. To the Alliance. They begged us to make the humans stop. The Thalan Empire, proud warriors with a 1,000-year military tradition, sent a message saying they would rather become slaves than face human tactics for another day. Nix felt the full weight of Tor's trauma through his telepathic connection. The fear, the confusion, the realization that everything they thought they knew about warfare had been wrong. The humans were confused by our reaction, Tor continued. They thought they had done well. They had ended the conflict quickly with minimal casualties on their side. They did not understand why everyone was looking at them with such fear. What happened then? Kira asked. Tor closed his ancient eyes. Emergency session of the Galactic Council. Every species voted the same way. Humans were banned from any future military involvement. Not because they were evil, but because they were too dangerous, too creative, too willing to break rules that kept warfare civilized. But they are peaceful now, Rex protested. Human traders visit the academy regularly. They seem harmless. They are peaceful, Tor agreed. Because they choose to be. But choice can change. That is what terrifies everyone who was there. He looked at each of the cadets in turn. You asked what happened during the Terra incident. Now you know. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? 3 days had passed since their meeting with Commander Tor, but the old veteran's words still echoed in the minds of the 3 cadets. Kira found herself unable to concentrate on her regular studies, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy as she tried to understand what they had learned. His story does not make sense, Rex said as they walked through the academy corridors toward the simulation center. How can a species that seems so ordinary be so dangerous in warfare that everyone fears them? Nix nodded, his telepathic abilities still processing the emotional residue he had picked up from Commander Tor. The fear in his memories was real. But there are gaps, missing pieces. He was holding back information. That is why we need to see for ourselves, Kira replied, her pattern recognition mind already formulating a plan. The Simulation Center has access to historical military data from across the galaxy. If we can find any records of human tactics, we can run them through the war simulation system. The Simulation Center was one of the most advanced facilities. At Nexus Prime Academy, massive holographic projectors could recreate any battle scenario, allowing cadets to experience historical conflicts firsthand. The quantum computers that powered the system could process millions of variables simultaneously, creating perfectly accurate recreations of military engagements. They entered the main simulation bay, a vast chamber lined with projection nodes and sensor arrays. At the center stood the control console, its multiple screens displaying various training scenarios currently running in other parts of the facility. "This should be simple enough," Kira said, approaching the main interface. "We just need to access the historical database and search for any human military engagements." She began typing commands into the system, her crystalline fingers moving quickly across the holographic keyboard. The database contained records from thousands of conflicts spanning centuries of galactic history. Surely there would be something about human warfare techniques. Search parameters: human military tactics, Earth origin, pre-alliance conflicts. She input into the system. The response was immediate and frustrating. "Access denied. Classified information." "Of course," Rex muttered, his forearms crossing in annoyance. "Even the simulation system has restrictions on human military data." Nick stepped closer to the console, his telepathic abilities probing the system's data streams. "Wait, there is something here, not direct records, but analysis files. Someone has been studying human tactics and storing the information in research databases." Kira adjusted her search parameters. Research analysis, tactical studies, human warfare methodology. This time, several files appeared on the screen. They were academic papers written by various military strategists over the past 2 centuries, attempting to understand and categorize human approaches to conflict. Most were heavily redacted, but enough information remained to piece together basic patterns. "Look at this," Kira said, pulling up a research paper titled "Unconventional Warfare Patterns in Pre-Contact Human History." It analyzes something called guerrilla warfare and asymmetric conflict resolution. Rex read over her shoulder, his warrior instincts trying to understand the concepts described in the paper. "These tactics seem chaotic. Where is the honor? Where are the rules of engagement?" "That appears to be the point," Nick said, his mental abilities picking up the emotional undertones in the research data. "According to this analysis, humans do not follow traditional warfare patterns. They adapt their tactics based on circumstances rather than following established military doctrine." Kira continued reading, her excitement growing as she recognized the pattern-based thinking that defined human tactical approaches. They use something called combined arms warfare, where different types of units work together in ways that multiply their effectiveness. And look at this: total war concepts where entire populations become part of the military effort. "Can we simulate any of this?" Rex asked, his curiosity overriding his confusion. "There are partial tactical models here," Kira replied, downloading the available data to the simulation system. "Not complete battle scenarios, but enough information to create basic simulations of human warfare methods." She began programming the simulation, inputting the human tactical data into a standard training scenario. The system would create a simple conflict between 2 forces, with one side using traditional galactic warfare methods and the other employing human tactics. "Simulation parameters set," the computer announced in its neutral voice. "Standard planetary assault scenario. Alliance forces versus independent colony defenders. Beginning tactical analysis." The holographic projectors activated, filling the simulation bay with a 3-dimensional battlefield. Rolling hills, forests, and a small city appeared around them, complete with military units positioned according to standard doctrine. Run simulation with human tactical parameters applied to defending forces, Kira commanded. The simulation began normally. Alliance ships approached the planet in standard formation, broadcasting surrender demands according to established protocol. The defending forces appeared to comply, their military units withdrawing from strategic positions as expected. Then everything changed. The orderly retreat of the defending forces suddenly became something else entirely. Instead of gathering at defensible positions, they scattered into small groups that seemed to disappear into the civilian population. Supply convoys that should have been secure suddenly came under attack from directions that made no tactical sense. What are they doing? Rex asked, watching in confusion as the simulation showed defending units attacking, and then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. The holographic display began to flicker. Warning messages appeared on the control console as the quantum processors struggled to handle the tactical complexity of the human warfare patterns. The system is having trouble processing the tactical data, Kira said, checking the error messages. Scrolling across her screen. The human tactics are creating too many variables for the standard algorithms to handle. Nick stepped closer to the projection, his telepathic senses picking up strange emotional resonances from the simulation itself. There is something wrong with this. The emotional patterns the simulation is generating ... they are not normal. The flickering grew worse. The attacking Alliance forces in the simulation began making decisions that violated their own tactical programming. Units that should have maintained formation broke apart to pursue enemy forces that kept disappearing. Supply lines that should have been protected became vulnerable as commanders made increasingly desperate attempts to bring the defenders to open battle. Simulation error detected, the computer announced. Tactical analysis parameters exceed normal variables. Recommend simulation termination. No, keep it running, Kira said, fascinated by what she was seeing. I want to see how this plays out. The simulation continued, but the holographic images became increasingly unstable. The defending forces, programmed with human tactical patterns, had somehow turned the entire battlefield into a maze of uncertainty. Every move the attackers made seemed to be anticipated and countered in ways that made no logical sense. This is impossible, Rex said, his warrior training struggling to understand what he was seeing. How can a smaller, weaker force control a battle like this? The answer came in the form of cascading system failures. One by one, the quantum processors responsible for running the simulation began overloading. The tactical complexity of the human warfare patterns was creating calculation loops that the system could not resolve. Warning, simulation matrix unstable, the computer announced, its voice now carrying an edge of electronic panic. Multiple processor conflicts detected. Recommend immediate shutdown. The holographic battlefield began to collapse in on itself. Images of the conflict flickered and distorted as the simulation system tried and failed to process the tactical data. Alarm. Sirens began sounding throughout the simulation center. Emergency shutdown initiated, the computer declared. All personnel evacuate simulation bay immediately. The 3 cadets ran for the exit as the massive holographic projectors sparked and shut down around them. Behind them, the control console displayed a cascade of error messages as the simulation system crashed completely. They stood in the corridor outside the simulation bay, breathing hard and staring at the now darkened chamber. Through the transparent walls, they could see maintenance robots already moving in to assess the damage. What just happened? Rex asked, his forearms trembling slightly from adrenaline. The simulation system could not handle human tactical thinking. Nick said, his telepathic abilities still reeling from the chaotic emotional patterns he had sensed from the failing simulation. The complexity was too great for our most advanced computers to process. Kira checked her datapad, which still contained the research files they had used to program the simulation. According to these tactical analyses, what we just saw was based on incomplete data. The researchers only had fragments of information about human warfare methods. Fragments, Rex repeated slowly. And fragments alone crashed our entire simulation system. Before any of them could respond, they heard footsteps approaching down the corridor. Academy security officers were heading their way, and their expressions suggested that the cadets were about to face serious questions about what had just happened in the simulation bay. The Academy Council chamber was a place that most cadets only saw during graduation ceremonies. Its circular design represented the unity of all galactic species, with seats arranged to give equal prominence to every member race of the Alliance. Ancient symbols covered the walls, representing treaties and agreements that had kept peace. In the galaxy for centuries. Kira, Rex, and Nick stood in the center of the chamber, feeling very small as representatives from dozens of species looked down at them. The damage to the simulation center had triggered automatic security protocols, and their unauthorized research had been discovered within hours. "Cadets," spoke Council Leader Vex, an elderly Altarian whose blue skin marked him as one of the founding species of the Alliance. "You stand accused of unauthorized access to classified materials and causing significant damage to Academy property. How do you answer these charges?" Kira stepped forward, her crystalline form dimmed with nervousness, but still showing the determination that had driven their investigation. "We were researching military history for our tactical studies assignment. We did not know the information was classified. The simulation system failure was accidental," Rex added, his forearms held respectfully at his sides. "We were only trying to understand human warfare tactics." At the mention of humans, a ripple of reaction went through the assembled council members. Several species representatives exchanged meaningful looks, while others shifted uncomfortably. In their seats. Council Leader Vex raised his hand for silence. "You sought information about human military capabilities. Despite warnings from your instructors and clear classification barriers, you continued your investigation. Why?" Nick spoke for the first time, his telepathic abilities picking up waves of complex emotions from the council members. "We could not understand why an entire species would be banned from galactic warfare. It seemed impossible that humans could be so dangerous when they appear so peaceful." "Appear," repeated Counselor Thane, a massive Gorvik whose rock-like skin made him look like a living mountain. "Appearances can be deceiving, young Mandari, especially where humans are concerned." The three cadets waited as the council members spoke among themselves in hushed tones. Languages from across the galaxy mixed together in a low murmur that filled the chamber with an alien symphony of concern and debate. Finally, Council Leader Vex stood, his ancient form commanding attention from all present. "Normally, your punishment would be severe. Unauthorized access to classified materials and destruction of Academy property are serious offenses. However, the Council has reached an unusual decision." Kira felt her hope rising, but the serious expressions around the chamber suggested this was not going to be a simple reprieve. "The Terra incident has been classified for 200 years, Vex continued. "In all that time, only senior military officers and council members have known the full truth. But your investigation has convinced us that perhaps it is time for the next generation to understand why certain knowledge must remain hidden." Counselor Mora, a graceful ethereal whose translucent form seemed to float rather than sit, spoke next. "What you are about to learn must never leave this chamber. You will be bound by the highest level of classification protocols. Do you accept these terms?" The three cadets exchanged glances. They had come too far to turn back now, despite the obvious seriousness of what they were about to hear. "We accept," they said in unison. Council Leader Vex activated a holographic projector in the center of the chamber. Images began to appear, showing star maps and fleet formations from 2 centuries ago. The conflict you investigated was indeed a minor border dispute, Vex began. The Khazari Republic and the Thalan Empire were fighting over mining rights in the Outer Rim. Standard procedure called for alliance mediation and limited military intervention if necessary. The hologram showed the disputed system, with two small fleets facing each other across empty space. It looked like dozens of similar conflicts that had been resolved through standard diplomatic and military procedures. Humanity had recently been contacted by our exploration fleets, continued Counselor Thane. They were eager to learn about galactic civilization and requested permission to observe how civilized species conducted warfare. The request seemed reasonable. New images appeared, showing human ships approaching the conflict zone. The vessels looked primitive compared to Alliance technology, but they carried observation equipment and diplomatic flags indicating their neutral status. The humans were assigned as observers only, said Counselor Mora. They were to watch, learn, and report back to their homeworld about Alliance military procedures. Senior officers from both fleets were instructed to answer their questions and help them understand our rules of engagement. Nick sensed a shift in the emotional atmosphere of the chamber. The initial calm was giving way to something darker, more troubled. What happened next? Kira asked. Council Leader Vex manipulated the hologram, showing the timeline of the conflict. For the first 3 months, everything proceeded normally. Limited engagements, proper protocols, minimal casualties. Both sides followed established rules of warfare, and the humans observed everything with great interest. They asked many questions, added Counselor Thane, about our tactics, our technologies, our concepts of honor in battle. They seemed particularly fascinated by our limitations, the rules we followed to keep warfare civilized. The hologram shifted, showing new ship movements and battle formations. But something was different now. The neat, orderly patterns of traditional galactic warfare were being replaced by something chaotic and unpredictable. In the 4th month, the Khazari military leaders approached the human observers, Vex continued. They requested advice on how to end the conflict more quickly. The humans agreed to share some of their own species' military knowledge. Rex leaned forward, his warrior instincts focused on the tactical display. What kind of advice did they give? That is where everything changed, said Counselor Mora, her ethereal form flickering with remembered distress. Within weeks, the entire nature of the conflict had transformed. The Khazari began using tactics that no civilized species had ever conceived. The holographic display showed the transformation in brutal detail. Supply lines that had been considered safe were suddenly under constant attack. Communication networks that followed standard military protocols were infiltrated and turned against their own users. Civilian populations that should have been protected became part of the warfare effort. The humans called it asymmetric warfare, Vex explained. They taught the Khazari to ignore our concepts of proper military engagement and instead focus on psychological pressure and resource disruption. Kira watched in horrified fascination as the hologram showed the systematic breakdown of traditional military order. But this violates every rule of galactic warfare. Exactly, said Counselor Thane. The humans did not understand that our rules exist to prevent warfare from becoming total destruction. They saw our limitations as inefficiencies to be corrected. The hologram showed the final phase of the conflict. Both fleets, once proud examples of their species' military might, were now scattered and demoralized. Ship commanders who had trained for decades in proper warfare found themselves unable to respond to tactics that made no sense according to established doctrine. The war ended when both sides surrendered simultaneously, Vex said quietly, not to each other, but to the Alliance Council. They begged us to intervene and stop the humans from providing any more military advice. The Thalan Empire, with a military tradition spanning 1,000 years, sent a formal request to become a protectorate rather than face human tactical thinking for another day. Added Counselor Mora. Nix felt the full weight of the Council's emotions pressing against his telepathic senses. Fear, yes, but also a deep sadness and sense of loss. The humans were confused by the reaction, Vex continued. They thought they had been helpful. From their perspective, they had ended a wasteful conflict quickly and efficiently. They could not understand why everyone was looking at them with such terror. What happened to them? Rex asked. Emergency session of the full Galactic Council, Counselor Thane replied. Every member species voted unanimously for resolution. 2,847. Humans were banned from any military involvement in galactic affairs, not as punishment, but as protection. Protection for who? Kira asked. Council Leader Vex looked directly at each of the cadets in turn. Protection for everyone, including the humans themselves. The silence in the council chamber stretched for long minutes after Council Leader Vex's final words. Kira felt her crystalline form flickering with confusion as she tried to process what they had learned. Protection for everyone, including the humans themselves. What could that possibly mean? I do not understand, Rex said, his forearms gesturing in frustration. If humans were trying to help, why would they need protection from themselves? Counselor Mora's ethereal form shifted, taking on a sadder, more translucent appearance. Because, young Bruthan, humans do not know when to stop. Council Leader Vex activated the holographic projector again, but this time the images that appeared were different. Instead of battle formations and fleet movements, the display showed statistical analyses and psychological profiles. After the Terra incident, we spent decades studying human nature, Vex explained. We needed to understand what had happened, and whether it could happen again. What we discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The hologram displayed complex charts and graphs showing human behavioral patterns. Kira's pattern recognition abilities immediately began processing the data, and what she saw made her light dim with growing comprehension. Humans possess several traits that make them uniquely dangerous in warfare, continued Counselor Thane. First, their pattern recognition abilities. They can see connections and possibilities that other species miss entirely. New data appeared on the display, showing comparative intelligence analyses between humans and other galactic species. In traditional academic areas, humans scored average or slightly below average. But in areas related to tactical thinking and adaptive problem solving, their scores were off the charts. They can predict enemy movements with accuracy that borders on precognition, added Counselor Mora. Not through any telepathic ability, but through pure analytical thinking. They see patterns in behavior that allow them to anticipate actions before the enemy has even decided to take them. Nix felt a chill run through his telepathic senses as he processed this information. That explains how they could counter traditional tactics so effectively. They were not just reacting to what was happening, they were preparing for what would happen next. Correct, said Vex. But that is only the beginning. Humans also possess what they call pack bonding behavior. They form emotional attachments to their companions that drive them to extraordinary lengths to protect each other. The holographic display shifted to show psychological profiles comparing bonding behaviors across different species. Most galactic races showed loyalty to family, clan, or species. But humans showed something unique, the ability to form family-level bonds with complete strangers, even members of other species. A human will fight harder for a companion they met yesterday than most species will fight for their own blood relatives, explained Counselor Thane. This makes them incredibly effective in group combat situations, but also makes them unpredictable when their bonded companions are threatened. Rex nodded slowly, his warrior background helping him understand the tactical implications. A soldier who fights desperately for strangers would be impossible to break through normal psychological warfare. Exactly, said Counselor Mora. But the most dangerous human trait is their creativity and violence. When faced with a problem, humans do not limit themselves to traditional solutions. They will turn anything, absolutely anything, into a weapon, if necessary. The hologram displayed a series of historical examples from human warfare, carefully selected from pre-contact records. Kira watched in amazement as the data showed humans turning farming tools into weapons using merchant ships as bombs and converting industrial equipment into military assets. This creativity extends to psychological warfare as well, Vex continued. Humans understand that the mind is the most important battlefield. They can break an enemy's will to fight without ever directly engaging their military forces. Nick sensed the deep unease in the council members as they shared this information. The emotional manipulation techniques they developed were unlike anything we had ever encountered. They could make an enemy afraid of their own shadow, questioning their own commanders, unable to trust their own perceptions. But surely these abilities could be controlled, Kira said. Rules of engagement, codes of conduct, supervision by alliance officers. Double quotes council leader, Vex's expression grew grave. That was attempted, young Villani. After the Terra incident, several council members suggested that humans could be useful allies if their abilities were properly regulated. We ran theoretical simulations to test this possibility. The holographic display changed again, showing the results of complex military modeling systems. Even viewing the data secondhand, Kira could see that something was fundamentally wrong with the projections. Every simulation ended the same way, Counselor Thane said quietly. Total human victory, but at a cost that no civilized species could accept. The humans would win, but they would lose themselves in the process. What do you mean? Rex asked. Human. Warfare techniques are like a virus, explained Counselor Mora. Once they begin using their full capabilities, they cannot stop. The creativity that makes them so effective also drives them to escalate beyond any reasonable limits. They become so focused on victory that they forget why they were fighting in the first place. The holographic data showed projection after projection of conflicts involving humans. In every case, the outcome was the same. The humans would solve the immediate problem, but create larger, more dangerous problems in the process. We realize that humans are not evil, Vex said. They are dangerous in the same way that fire is dangerous. Incredibly useful under the right circumstances, but capable of burning down everything around them if not carefully controlled. And unlike fire, humans cannot be easily extinguished once they are lit, added Counselor Thane. Nix felt the weight of centuries of fear and respect flowing from the council members. So the ban was not to punish humans, but to protect them from becoming something they would not want to be. Correct, said Counselor Mora. Humans are capable of kindness, creativity, and joy that rivals any species in the galaxy. But warfare brings out aspects of their nature that even they find disturbing. The ban protects their better angels from their inner demons. Council Leader Vex deactivated the holographic display and looked directly at the three cadets. You asked why humans are banned from galactic warfare. Now you know, they are too good at it. So good that they would win every conflict, but lose their souls in the process. What about now? Kira asked. Humans have been part of the Alliance for 50 years. They seem peaceful, integrated into galactic society. They are peaceful because they choose to be, Vex replied. Because they focus their energies on trade, exploration, and cultural exchange instead of warfare. But the capacity remains. It will always remain. The three cadets stood in silence as the full weight of their discovery settled upon them. They had sought answers about human military capabilities and found something far more complex than they had imagined. You will graduate tomorrow, Council Leader Vex announced. You will take commissions as officers in the Alliance fleet, and you will carry this knowledge with you for the rest of your lives. "Why tell us this?" Rex asked. "Why share something so classified with mere cadets?" "Because you will encounter humans in your service," Counselor Thane replied. "You will work alongside them, trade with them, perhaps even call them friends. And when you do, you will remember this conversation. You will remember that the cheerful human trader sharing stories in the mess hall carries within himself the capacity to revolutionize warfare in ways that would terrify entire civilizations. Remember them with respect," added Counselor Mora. "But also remember why we chose to keep them as friends rather than enemies." As the three cadets were led from the chamber, each carried with them a new understanding of the delicate balance that kept peace in the galaxy. They had learned that sometimes the greatest act of wisdom was knowing when not to use the weapons at your disposal. Outside the council chamber, they could see through the station's massive windows as a small human merchant vessel docked at one of the trading bays. The crew that emerged were laughing and joking with each other, carrying samples of goods from their homeworld to share with their galactic neighbors. They looked so ordinary, so harmless. But now the three cadets knew the truth that lay beneath that peaceful exterior, and why the galaxy had decided that some abilities were too dangerous to ever unleash again.